Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Kalika and you're gonna be a spicier person after watching this video. I led a revolution against a horrible lying manager. To set the scene, I work in a bookstore, but I'm very much an underling, which is what I prefer. I'm usually in the back, helping unpack shipments and prepare them for shelving. I also collect online orders and package them up for shipping, and sometimes I do the night shelving or overnight projects. It's always been my favourite because I rarely have to deal with the managers and it's a much more carefree environment than working the floor and trying to push people into buying things. Our store has gone through several store managers recently because most of them are getting corporate promotions or they're finding better opportunities elsewhere. Our store is part of a nationwide chain and we're sadly struggling a lot against our competitors. Rather than promoting someone within our store who knows how our store functions and is familiar with the employees and their strengths, corporate has been assigning us store managers that are either not from our store, have never been a store manager before, or have no experience in book selling. Obviously, this creates a lot of problems and it's been affecting our store badly. Nothing screws us over worse than when corporate intervenes. A couple years ago, we got a new store manager that was unfamiliar with the company, unfamiliar with our store, and had zero experience in managing a retail store to begin with. We already had concerns, but decided to at least work with her first because maybe she'd be a natural or she'd develop into someone that was good for our store. I'm gonna call her Tamara. When Tamara was first brought into our store, rather than taking a week or so to observe our store and the employees before making adjustments and changing things, she leaped right in, changing store policies and taking on other people's tasks. She took over things like the scheduling and making sure we have a daily schedule posted every morning to know where we were supposed to be, when our breaks were, etc., and other jobs that take a long time to do and have always been delegated to assistant managers to help things run smoothly. She put people in places where they weren't trained, but didn't spend any time training them on their new jobs. She was also very late with every weekly schedule. It would be 9 PM Saturday night and we would still be waiting for the schedule for the next week. And our scheduled weeks always starts on a Sunday, so we'd literally be repetitively calling the store on Saturday night to find out if we had to show up the next morning. So many sections of the store fell into disarray and everyone was getting angry about not having our schedules. She clearly couldn't handle so much and refused to delegate things to change that. On top of that, she gave horrible advice. Just to give an example, she advised the shelvers to hide from customers while they were shelving so they wouldn't have to be stopped to provide customer service. But worst of all, she broke the cardinal rule of the store: do not mess with the back room. The back room is where we handle shipments and had its own separate manager who ran that area like clockwork. It was completely organised. We had a system we were well trained in and we have always had things processed fast and all the new product unboxed, organised on carts and ready to be shelved on time. Tamara did not bother to observe any of this and put all of her focus on that back area. She got it in her head that our store would thrive if we completely changed up the back room, and she had no idea what we actually do back there. First, she took away a lot of our carts so we had less to stock our product on, and our usual shipments are anywhere from 150 to 200 boxes a day. That's a lot of books, and we need those carts. Then she took away the shelving cards we use on our carts to help divide up the titles, not only by their main subject like history or science, but also divided them up by their subcategories like history, civil war, or science physics. The cards made it so that the shelvers don't have to look up every single item to figure out where they go. They can just grab them and shelve them, only having to worry about getting the authors' names in order alphabetically. So now we have overstuffed, disorganized carts and they're not getting shelved on time because the shelvers had to keep looking up where everything goes. We explained this to Tamara over and over again in every way we could think to explain it, but she refused to listen and shifted the blame onto us. She also told us that taking away the cards was corporate's ideas, not hers, and that they were no longer a required item for the stores. We did our best to try to still get things organised, but we were being rushed so fast and had so many books to work with, there was no time to scan through every single item, organise them on the cart, and try to remember where we put which subsection on each cart. I honestly felt horrible for the shelvers and a lot of them threatened to, and did, quit. It made our job in the back room frustrating because we knew we were being forced to screw them over, and when things didn't work out well in the back, it hits the entire store. Less product is being shelved, workers are getting stressed trying to figure out where things go. Morale could not have been worse. And the worst part was, she refused to listen to anyone who approached her with concerns. Her attitude was, work smarter, not harder, and just make it happen. Sorry, retail doesn't work that way. This is where I come in. Working in the back specifically on online orders, I didn't have to deal with her face to face much because I was always running around and frankly avoiding her because I didn't want to deal with her. This gave me an advantage. Not only was I able to see the notes she was leaving behind for employees, telling them that what they were doing was wrong, her bad ideas like making the shelvers hide from customers, and announcing the things she was changing that were hurting our work. On top of that, I was able to eavesdrop on the meetings she would hold back there with the assistant managers, explaining her great new ideas, which were all horrible. With so many of the co-workers threatening to quit and getting miserable with work, knowing what they would have to deal with, we all agreed we had to do something. So I went online to look up ideas for the best way to handle this and got some good tips. Now the revenge. I snuck my phone into the back and started taking pictures of every note, every announcement, even the disorganized carts and the giant mess she was creating in the back room. We had a mountain of boxes we couldn't even get to because the carts were not being emptied fast enough to give us room. I eavesdropped on as many of her little meetings in the back as I could so I could keep track of what other policies she was breaking, even caught her trash talking us, calling one of our mentally ill co-workers overly dramatic, even though that co-worker never speaks up and just takes it when she's upset, saying we were too stuck in our old ways and too stubborn for change, even called the manager who ran the back room an idiot and laughing about how pissed off Tamara was making her. Then I went digging through the store's computer until I found the full list of corporate guidelines, most of which she had broken and didn't care, the biggest of all being the scheduling. And it turns out it's against our state's labour laws for managers to not give us our schedules 14 days in advance. After I collected as much as I could, I collaborated with other angry co-workers, gathering whatever additional information they had, and together we compiled a document, each of us explaining what was going wrong, what rules and labour laws were being broken, and included all the pictures I had taken with my phone to provide evidence. We did include the disrespectful way she was talking to us and about us, but none of us really expected them to be taken seriously, and we had no proof to provide. After we all looked over it and agreed we were satisfied with it, we emailed a copy to corporate, a copy to HR, and a copy to the regional manager who had assigned Tamara to us in the first place. It only took 24 hours before the regional manager was called in and questioned about why on earth he kept Tamara employed with us, and how could he not know all the crap she's been doing. I would have given him some slack, but the truth was he had visited our store on a regular basis, seen the majority of this stuff, and did nothing, since his ass was on the line for hiring her, and he didn't want to look bad by admitting his mistake. Eventually, people from corporate showed up to speak with Tamara and the regional manager. I wasn't there to see it, but according to the few who did, because it was held in our break room, she was drunk. Honest to God, drunk. She was slurring her words, wavering in her seat, and could barely give a cohesive answer to anything they asked her. It ended in them telling her to hand in her resignation because it would look better for her than if she was just fired. She walked out of there, having no idea who had taken this to corporate, and even saw the document we composed anonymously against her. About a month later, the regional manager also resigned as he didn't recover from letting her do this. We're still having problems with new managers, but our store has now earned the reputation as the store who will not put up with that kind of crap, and that's caused them to be a little more cautious as to who they assign to us. And that, to me, is the ultimate win. Never mess with the underlings. Well, it looks like everyone in that store bound together and grew a spine in order to turn over a new leaf for the store. Too many puns? I'll leave it there. My wannabe fashionista co-worker always threw shade at me for being frumpy. She looked frumpier, unemployed. TLDR at the bottom. I worked at a popular high-end clothing store while I was in graduate school. I'm an engineer. I won't name the brand, but it's the sort that charges $50 for a pair of male boxer briefs, $200 for a lady's fancy bra, $400 or more for a pair of jeans, $1,000 or more for those skinny suits that hip guys wear to their job, where the hems of their pants reveal that they're wearing loafers without socks. The clothes weren't really my style, but the starting pay was $2 higher than minimum wage, and higher than most of the other surrounding stores. This was at a rich people shopping centre, where lots of people who shop there are wannabe celebrities and constant selfie takers. I was surprised to get hired there, but was relieved that I wouldn't really have to do customer service, as I worked only in the stockroom. I'd put out clothes on the shelves and racks before and after closing, and also arrange everything in the back to make it organised. I was also trained so that in emergency situations I could cover register if we were short-handed, so that the regular associates could go on break. I was hardly seen by customers, but I still had to wear the clothes the store sold to promote the image of the company. I didn't, thankfully, have to wear the dainty little suits, but I did sport the jeans and other casual things we sold. It was a job. I didn't love it and I didn't hate it. I just worked, took my pay, went to school and went home. At least, that's the way it was for 2 months. After those 2 months, Jessica began to work during the same hours as me. She was about my age, I was 22, no more than maybe 25 tops. She didn't work in the stockroom, it was just me back there, with 1 or 2 other college guys, but worked the front. She wasn't the manager or even a supervisor, but she swore she was in charge of me. She made it known to everyone, even customers, that she graduated with an associate's degree in fashion marketing from FIDM. I suppose it's a big deal, but I was thinking, girl, if you're a college graduate, why are you bragging about it as if it has something to do with you folding jeans and ringing people up at the register? She talked like she was a fashion expert and in the fashion industry, and would talk about the New York or Paris fashion weeks in a familiar way that implied that she just got off the plane after attending these events personally. You know the type. The kind that talks about famous fashion designers by their first name, as if they knew them. Well, she always criticised the way I wore the jeans because I didn't tuck in my t-shirt like the mannequin, or that I wore Chuck Taylors on my feet instead of the little leather Sperry topsiders knockoffs we sold for $300. We were given a clothing allowance as employees. As a stock person, I was allowed 3 complete outfits for free, everything from tops to underwear to socks, and pants, but not shoes. If I wanted more and it was specifically for wearing at the store, I could mark it as a uniform purchase and have the price deducted from my check a little at a time. This was advantageous because they wouldn't charge you tax for them and charge you only 1/3 of the retail price. Uniform purchase was distinctly separate from store discount, for which we also received a percentage off, but it wasn't the incredible 66% discount we got for uniform purchases. Jessica would snicker at me when I took over the register for someone, shake her head or roll her eyes at me as if I looked really ugly. I'm always thinking, whatever girl, you want to be model, you aren't even hot and you're not the boss, who are you? But I held my tongue. She would also complain if I was supposedly not fast enough and grabbing a size medium from the back because a customer is requesting the dress and all we have on the floor are smalls and larges. She trashed me to the customer and when I showed up would sarcastically say, "Finally," and turn to the customer with a "see what I have to put up with" expression. She was especially mean if any customers got chatty with me and treated me with respect, and if those customers were female and getting flirty with me, Jessica would be a total cockblock. The real manager, Paula, about 35, had her own issues to deal with beyond petty bickering between a stock boy and an entry-level sales associate with delusions of Project Runway grandeur. The assistant manager, another fashion industry wannabe named Heather, was just like Jessica, but thankfully I hardly interacted with her. According to my co-workers, Heather was just as bad as Jessica, except Heather had keyholder privileges, which meant she was one step above just being as worthless as the rest of us. She looked to be in her late 20s. Even though I didn't plan on making this store my career, and even though Jessica didn't bother me that much, I thought it wouldn't hurt to get this witch fired. To her face, I'd just smile and act like I was following her orders happily, or didn't mind when she would point at me rudely or snap her fingers at me like she was calling a dog. Jessica would always hear a directive from one of the managers and then go around telling the other employees what to do, as if they didn't have ears. She tried to act as if it was her directive. Her co-workers who were the same rank as her would sometimes vent to me about how Jessica acted like she was in charge, when in some cases she had even less time in the company than the other employees on the floor. I noticed that when I arranged clothes in the back, especially big ticket, desirable clothes that were seen in magazines and our company's advertisement campaigns, she'd order me to set aside things in her size. I do it because it's my job to set aside things if employees want to buy them outright at a discount, or put it as a uniform purchase. Whenever an employee was on register, really a big iPad with a cash drawer beneath, you could tap in a code and the register would show a rundown of every non-customer transaction that employees performed that day, and with a few more keystrokes, their transactions over many days. The managers knew this code, of course, and I'll assume Jessica knew the code too because Heather shared the code with her. The code pretty much unlocked all the register's managerial functions. I wasn't supposed to know the code, but I did, because there's a mirror on the wall behind the register, and I was restocking paper handbags behind Heather when I saw her tap in the 4-digit code. She assumed I was stupid and didn't understand the incredibly complex wizardry that is a 2-year-old low-end spec iPad. I knew Jessica was getting rung up for uniform purchases when she should have been getting rung up for the regular employee discount. She assumed that when I set aside all those expensive items for her that I was too dumb to know what she was doing, just because I might have something of a mouth-breather countenance, unfortunately. Even if I look on the surface like a fugitive from the trailer park, something told me Jessica wasn't going to be using $800 heels, a $500 dress, and a $1,200 motorcycle jacket while working at the store. And anyway, I asked around. No one saw Jessica wearing any of the truly fancy clothes she bought at her store, at what the other employees assumed was simply a regular employee discount. I thought maybe she was being honest too. It was possible after all, because I didn't always work with her. Maybe she wore evening dresses to work on her other shifts? Whatever. I decided to make sure. One time when everyone was busy doing other stuff and the store had to resort to putting me on the register, I typed in Heather's code and pulled up Jessica's purchases. As I suspected, she had bought thousands of dollars worth of our store's best items and put them all as uniform purchases and not at a regular discount. So I swiped print, and the register switches from the regular tape to the 8.5 by 11 inch printer beneath the counter, and a complete rundown of all of Jessica's purchases come out. I highlight all the most expensive items that she was charged for uniform purchase, such as her $1,200 jacket would only be $300, and even that was tax-free and she got to pay it little by little. I knew that my manager Paula wasn't exactly a nuclear physicist, and she was more interested in moving up the chain of command so that she could have a job higher than store manager in the company. So as long as her store sales numbers looked good, she didn't care what her assistant Heather did. Except if it was a violation of company policy, that might reflect badly on her. I knew Heather was in on Jessica's scam because you're not allowed to ring yourself up at the store, you have to have someone else do it, and none of the other associates would want to conspire with her for fear of getting fired or worse. To make sure, I printed Heather's purchase history too. I didn't see Heather as often as I saw Jessica, but I could also see really glaring red flags in her purchase report. Like, she bought a $900 nightclub dress as a uniform purchase, which I'm quite sure she never wore to work. I did the same highlighting on suspicious items as I did with Jessica's. Then, because none of this was really my business, I was just a part-time a-hole who worked in the stockroom after all, I waited for the most fun opportunity to lower the boom. Jessica got on her little Bluetooth earpiece that she wears on the sales floor that she thinks makes her look like a VIP, and says, "OP, I'm gonna need this in a size small, customer waiting, get the lead out." So I bring the item, and Jessica says I'm not passing muster. I thought, wow Jessica, you sounded really 1940s there, you wannabe pin-up girl. After the customer leaves, Jessica says, "I'm going to need you to go on a trash run and sweep out the receiving bay, and I need you to cover Annie's lunch." I laugh and tell her, "Who died and made you supervisor, you effing head-ass burnout?" She looks like she was the goddamn crypt keeper for a second and then she wanted to punch me, before she remembered that I'm 6'2" and outweigh her by 100 pounds. She hisses, "You are so fired, you effing geek. Heather's gonna hear about this." I tell her, "F you, I'm going to lunch," and I clock out and leave. When I come back, I see Jessica immediately get on her little earpiece. Before I even reach the stockroom, Heather is there, and the manager Paula intercepts me. Paula says to a nearby worker, "Annie, can you cover register? We have an urgent matter to deal with." I know I'm supposed to be fired. Which is why, during my lunch, I went to the copy place and made PDF scans of the printouts I made for Jessica and Heather. I had all the corporate's big shot emails. They were in the new hire handbooks all of us got when we started working. I saved a draft to each, but didn't hit send yet. I had the printouts as attachments. In the body of my email, I described exactly what had been going on. I did send one email, and that was to Paula the manager herself. But I didn't press send until we were on our way to the employee break room. Paula tells me, "OP, Heather sent me a text that says you were really verbally abusive to Jessica. Heather herself says that Jessica has complained to her on numerous occasions that you are a substandard employee, and only Heather's own personal kindness has prevented her, as your supervisor, from presenting your name to me for termination. I came in myself, on my day off I might add, to see if you have anything to say in order to save your job." It's been a couple of years, so of course that can't be exactly what she said, but it was something typical and rehearsed and faux professional that any low-level boss would say when trying to sound important. I said I didn't have anything to say in my defense, and that in fact, I quit. Jessica and Heather looked surprised, but then Jessica started smiling. She had won, she thought. Paula looked disappointed and said, "I'm very sorry to hear you say that. At least for me, you've always done your job well. You may collect your last... Oh, but before I go, I think you should look at these printouts. I know you don't spend a lot of time studying this stuff, but I thought you might find it interesting. It's the last 3 months of Jessica's and Heather's employee purchases. Notice how they always ring each other up, and notice all the stuff they're claiming to use as uniforms? $1,000 evening dresses? Stiletto heels? Fascinating. Anyway, If you have any trouble understanding it, I explained it in an email I sent to your cell phone. You should have it already if you check. I have the same email ready to go to Dan and Pam and Kimberly and Victor and Kevin because I thought they'd get a kick out of it too, but I haven't sent it yet. I was hoping you could look it over and email me back when you're ready. I mean, if you want me to edit anything. After all, you are the manager, and I assumed you had your suspicions about these two disgusting thieves already, since it's your job to keep on top of things. I turned to Heather. I borrowed your code. You know, the same one you loaned to Jessica? Hope you don't mind. Later! Then I got up and left. I had the pleasure of seeing Jessica and Heather's smug expressions melt instantly to one of a, oh crap. Later that afternoon, my phone was ringing. It was Paula. She was practically crying. She at least sounds like she was sobbing while she pleads, OP, please don't send those emails. I fired Heather and Jessica. They're done. And please don't quit. What can I do to make this right? Please, OP. Remember, I was always nice to you. Please don't tell anyone about... She's right. I have no beef with her. She has always been nice to me. I'm kind of embarrassed. I tell Paula to relax. I'm not a snitch. Against cool people anyway. I'm not a blackmailer and I'm not out for blood. I already quit and I'm keeping my mouth shut. A few days later, I showed up for my final check. I learned from one of the sales associates that corporate loss prevention was called in. Our corporate office is only a few miles from the retail location to interview both Heather and Jessica about their fraud. Paula had used all her political and managerial dexterity to frame the situation in such a way that made it look as if she, as a responsible and observant manager, had discovered the employee dishonesty. The narrative worked. In lieu of arrest and heavy fines for what amounted to outright grand larceny, Jessica and Heather were simply fired, blacklisted from the store, and due to the store's prominence, to say nothing of cross-company word of mouth. Blacklisted from working at any other prestigious fashion brands, they were of course unable to use the company as a reference, and due to being fired for cause, could not file for unemployment. Jessica's fantasy for being a major player for any fashion label in any capacity is deader than Lenin. Paula was actually in the store that day and practically ran to me, hugging me to thank her for keeping the scandal at a store level. It's been handled, I swear. I told her no problem. What I didn't tell her was that I never did delete those drafts. She offered me a reward of free merchandise and again asked me to reconsider coming back as a stock person, even a sales associate. No thanks. I'm going to look awful silly in those dainty little suits at my super cool new job of working at Sizzler. Same salary, lateral career move. It all ended okay. Paula ended up rising in the company so that she later found a desk at their head office. A year after the whole debacle, I finished my degree. Had a short stint as the night manager of Sizzler, but now I'm doing what I really want to do. Except, now at my job, guess what I have to wear? Yeah, dainty little suits. I wear socks though. The need for something nice to wear at work led me back to my old store, where Paula was once manager. She didn't work there anymore, but one phone call from a sales associate to her office, because I said I knew her, led to a nice chat and 3 suits at a generous discount. I refused to take at least one absolutely free, even though she offered. That's how I found out about her rise in the company. She also told me that it came to light that Jessica and Heather had actually been reselling a lot of the clothes on eBay at a markdown from the store, but still at a huge profit for themselves. The store found out because they offered to prosecute the 2 women less if they could return the items, but too late. They admitted the items were resold at online auction. Both Jessica and Heather were slapped with huge fines to avoid big girl jail. Paula and I are now social media friends. Those old email drafts, deleted. I would have never torpedoed Heather and Jessica if they just left me alone to do my job in peace and didn't try to feel big and important at my expense. I would have left them to live in their self-medicating lies, live and let live. Other than some difficult customers, people like Heather and Jessica are what make working in retail such a nightmare for so many, and that's why I feel no guilt about destroying them. I'm sure Jessica had lots to talk about at that year's Milan Fashion Week. Hold this L, witch. Okay, so that's all for r/ProRevenge. I really hope you did enjoy it. As always, if you do want to see more content like this, then please do subscribe. My Twitter, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description, and any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!